Bitcoiners? I hope you didn't mind the brief delay. I had some technical problems while I set up. Sometimes it just won't read my camera and tries to put me live with a completely black screen. So you gotta reboot. Today was because the iCloud didn't sync between the phone. Everything was charged. Everything was totally charged. The iCloud, I create my file on the phone and then I shift it to the iPad. For some reason, the notes and albums that I had wouldn't sync on the iPad, so I was ready to go on time. And I had to pull the phone off, which is the camera, to try to get the images so that I have my notes properly uploaded. And then when I put the camera back on, fail blog. Failure. Camera wouldn't read, black, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we survived. We're here. And guess what? The sun is up. We're good, guys. Bitcoin's running at a pretty conversion rate, by the way. But we don't care about the price today, right? We got a lot of other stuff to talk about, and we're going to talk about it with our coffee and enjoy our day. So let's see what people are saying. Good to hear that. I guess I missed a few of these. They're not coming through exactly. Good mornings from everyone. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, friends. Good morning, Boo Boo. Good morning. I did it. Yeah, I did it. Price is just scorekeeping. Indeed. There we go. All right. Here's the Bitcoin key, I think. Boo Boo Bodacious, perhaps. Is that what we're talking about? So, as you know, we like to start every one of these gatherings with the fakest news we can find. What's the fakest news we can find? Well, here you go. Here's a good one. We got a lot of fake news today. This is from Sarah Jones. She's a New York mag writer, right? Assalamu alaikum. Another New York Times hit piece. Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that today. It's a big media theme today. So, Sarah Jones, who writes for New York Mag, has a pretty interesting take. She says that children are not property. So that I'm with you. They're not property. But here's her tweet about the article she wrote about children not being property. She says that the parental rights movement actively threatens the safety and well-being of children, and by extension, democracy itself. So let me get the logic here. The parents' rights subvert democracy itself. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Okay. Here's one that I continue to think we got to get them. Bitcoin 2023, May 18th to 20th. I'm telling you, I've been after this speaker for a long time. I think most of our industry problems would go away if we get this speaker to join our industry. This is from CNN Politics. They didn't dig deeper than this, right? We're still in Moscow time here. They didn't dig deeper. Hunter Biden art for sale at $85,000 a piece in New York Gallery, even though he's got a Republican investigation. That's okay. So we got to get Hunter Biden on. I'm serious. We got to get him at Bitcoin 2023. We got to get him hired at the exchanges. We got to get Hunter Biden just all over the crypto's fine, right? Because I think we can draft behind a lot of the crypto rules. So get him involved in crypto because he's already, he's done some NFTs and stuff like that. And I think Bitcoiners can kind of draft behind whatever the key to his success is. I love it, right? We got to get Hunter Biden in our industry because here he is and no one seems to scratch any further, right? He's got a Republican investigation, but by the way, he's selling all this art, right? Now, I don't know why it is that Bitcoiners and the crypto people have to live under the constant suspicion of money laundering. How does he get away from it, right? Secrets. We want him. We love him. Let's get him in. So we're going to get to the New York Times piece. But first, we got to go over the funniest media interaction maybe of the year, right? We've had a lot of funny interactions between media and personalities this year, but nothing beats what happened last night. what happened last night might actually change media for good going forward. It was that big of a deal. I think we haven't even begun to understand the repercussions. So here's what happened. Last night, Elon Musk got an interview both on Spaces and live in person with a guy named James. Let me see what his name is. James Clayton, right? James Clayton. So James Clayton and Elon Musk sat down yesterday. And some people had a feeling it was not going to go well for James Clayton. First of all, people underlined some of his previous tweets. Here's one from, just to give you the context of this BBC reporter, right? Just to give you some context. So here he is back last year talking about Joe Rogan. So here's what he says. The inherent problem with flagging misinformation is that it gives the peddlers of it publicity. Joe Rogan here rewarded for airing dangerous nonsense about COVID. Remember last year when everyone was on about Joe Rogan being on horse tranquilizers and things like that, right? So, there he is. So some people thought this was going to be a problem. And Texas Lindsay here says that Elon Musk just announced that he's about to do a space with this BBC reporter. After looking through his tweets, this guy seemed very alarmed that Elon removed the COVID misinformation policy in November. Pro-censorship and mainstream media should be interesting. So what ends up happening is he sits down with this guy, and Ian Miles Chong has a good breakdown. He says, Elon Musk absolutely embarrassed this idiot BBC reporter on stage about the supposed rise in hate speech. The guy can't name a single example of hate speech. So that was one of their interactions where they sat down and he was saying, well, you brought all these new people back on Twitter and the For You category of the algorithm, not the ones that I'm following, but the For You, I've had all kinds of attacks and all kinds of craziness. And it turns out Elon Musk pushed him to name one and he couldn't, so he had to switch the subject. And by this time, you've got millions of people in the room, in the spaces that they both. So remember, this is the important part, I think. I think this is the important part. You get Elon in spaces, unedited, unvarnished, straight up. That's the interview between this guy and Elon Musk. Elon Musk completely destroys him in the end. I'm going to keep going through some of the destruction here. But as it went on, 3 million people joined the spaces. 3 million people. Now, I'll get to why that's important because there's repercussions to all this. So here's just a few of the interesting takeaways, right? BBC, do you prioritize misinformation or free speech? Elon, who determines what is misinformation? The BBC? BBC asks, well, are you policing it? Elon says, has the BBC ever reported something that wasn't true? So that's just one. He goes through one of the better knockout punches in it was the following. When the BBC guy starts pressing Elon about whether or not he's still the CEO of Twitter, he says, no, I've made the dog the CEO. Haven't you seen the pictures? Right? He's up there. The dog is up there. And by the way, Elon Musk has erased the company Twitter. It doesn't exist anymore. It's become X, his initial plan. If you remember his original company, X, and it was going to be everything matched in one. He's actually now filed for a full name change. So one can imagine that some of this payments technology is about to come, right? So a pretty interesting way of seeing it, right? So, but the best part of it is that Elon managed to turn the tables, right? So Elon managed to turn the tables during the interview. And as they're talking about freedom of speech and what's going on and who's got what role and who's doing what right now, the BBC says the BBC reporter, Mr. Clayton, says, this is not an interview about the BBC. And Elon Musk turns to him and says, oh, you thought it wasn't? So in the end, Elon is interviewing this guy, and he didn't get the joke. He didn't get the memo that he was the one being put on trial or getting the gotcha questions redirected him. He tried the normal gotcha stuff with Elon, right? Well, are you still the CEO? And Elon smashed him away, called it the dog, right? So remember what we talk about here a lot, the irreverence and how important irreverence is for debating with the mainstream media, debating with the PSYOP purveyors. You know, just look at what happened with the New York Times piece, right? If you guys noticed, we talked about it yesterday, the Pierre Rochard video. Now, Pierre Rochard and Riot, what ended up happening was when they came out with this New York Times article, which was a hit piece on Bitcoin, Pierre Rochard created the best kind of prank joke. And the best kind of prank joke looks like this, right? The best kind of prank joke looks exactly like what Pierre Rochard did. So the best kind of prank joke Only the people who are at the right level of cognition get the joke. The people who don't get, that there has to be an element of people who don't get the joke in order for one of these pranks to work, right? So if you watch the Pierre Rochard video, what you got to see is Pierre Rochard sitting there with a carbon dioxide meter and walking around and walking around mines, and he picks up some weeds and says, "This is just emitting some beautiful CO2. This is some of the freshest air I've ever breathed." And he goes he goes inside, and the carbon dioxide never goes up. And then he even creates some fake suspension in the video. What's going to happen if I move to the next room? Is the carbon dioxide going to go up? If it goes down, we've got even bigger questions. So remember, the best jokes in these cases are the ones where anyone who's a Bitcoiner understood what Pierre was doing, right? That he was using the trappings of science. He kept citing science. Well, according to science. Now, I worked with Pierre for years, so it's easy for me to tell if he's joking or not, right? So I have direct personal acquaintance and friendship with the guy. So I could tell right away we were watching something hilarious and funny. But that's the part that works, is that there's a whole group of people who take it literally. They didn't understand it was a joke. They didn't understand that when he was citing science, it was absurd. It was total theater of the absurd. And when you go into the comments, you can tell, right? People are actually trying to argue Pierre Rochard about his scientific method, his what he did for the study, how bullshit it was, and they're actually trying to argue facts in what was clearly theater. But that's what makes it funny, that half the people didn't understand it was theater. And then it gets even better. Because Community Notes ended up tagging a warning to the riot mining video and Pierre Rochard, and what Pierre Rochard did. So they tie this Community Notes to it, which we love. We love Community Notes, right? We've been talking about how it's an effective algorithmic tool because it has a cross-section of people, doesn't look for trolling, looks for finding opinions across the aisle and pushing those forward so that that there's an aggregate counterpoint, not just a partisan counterpoint, an aggregate counterpoint. So the Pierre Rochard video ends up getting tagged by Community Notes, and they get into the literal, like, this is not exact science. But because Bitcoiners are so motivated here, they actually ended up spamming the Community Notes tag into the ground and got rid of it by saying not helpful, not helpful. Because you can vote on the usefulness of a Community Note. And enough people yesterday managed to vote no to the Community Note that it was erased. So now, we talked about Elon Musk Spaces getting millions of live viewers in the room, live listeners in the room, right? Millions, over 3 million. Pierre Rochard's video already has over 3 million views itself. 2 something yesterday, but I'm guessing we're up to 3 by now. So I haven't seen the 3 confirmed, but it was well over 2 yesterday afternoon when I was checking, and the Community Notes was taken away. So this is important for the simple reason that we're seeing this amalgamation of irreverence and humor, which is a much more effective counterweight to engaging with mainstream media on the facts. Remember, facts don't matter, right? No fact is going to change some of these brain dead, smooth brain people, right? The NPCs, no amount of facts are going to change them. You need comedy, that'll work. That's one of the few things. Fear, we don't necessarily need to go down that road. The reality of starvation and hunger and self-survival, those things will break the hypnosis, right? There's a few things powerful enough to break the hypnosis, but it's not facts. It's not Ben Shapiro doing a really factual argument and managing to prove to people that it wasn't what they thought it was. That's a great lesson that I took from working for an administration in Canada that was so focused on talking points and logic and reason and thinking that they could actually persuade people that conservatives weren't Nazis or Hitler based on reality and the truth. None of that works, right? None of that works. People in the end will have feelings about these things, and only feelings will change what they look for outwardly, which is why fear and opportunity is also another one, right? Having the chance to be successful at something will help you change your idea. But in this case, the irreverence is another really effective tool, because remember, one of the main tenets of the BBC and fiat journalism is the prestige of credentialism having an outlet, right? So you go to these schools, you get into the BBC, and then you get to be one of the people who determines what is misinformation and what isn't. And if you end up laughing at these people, you laugh at their degrees, you laugh at what they say, you laugh at their nonsense, you laugh at what's her name saying the parental rights movement threatens democracy itself. I mean, it's absurd on its face. And if you don't engage this stuff with laughter, if you try to engage it with logic, you're not going to win, right? So go back to Elon Musk. He's now tweeting this morning pictures of the Dogecoin as the CEO. Remember, the other day he also changed his name to Harry Bolz on Twitter. So he changed his name to Harry Bolz. He sent out the following tweet, right, about just to promote the BBC thing. This is what he said to promote the BBC Spaces yesterday. He says, "Penetrating deep and hard with BBC." Come on. Come on. This is some of the most irreverent stuff we've ever seen. This is on another level of irreverence. He's changed so now that the company itself is called X, he changed the sign outside on Market Street and if you don't know Market Street is like the main street, and that's where the Twitter offices are. I think it's around Market Street. I've seen it before, and it's in downtown San Francisco. So Market Street, for example, where the newest Whole Foods just closed yesterday. They opened a Whole Foods 1 year ago, an Amazon-owned Whole Foods, right? Great grocery store. Well, I'm a Trader Joe's fan when I do groceries at major grocery stores in the United States, but Whole Foods does have some stuff, and it's pretty good, right? In a bind. So they opened this new Whole Foods, 1 year old, beautiful building, right on the main street of San Francisco, where that nearby where the creator of Cash App was murdered just last week, right? Very sad. I can't even look at the pictures. I can't even read about the story. It's so sad. It touched me. It touched me because of, he's got a daughter. It's just beyond sad, right? I didn't know the guy. Bobby Lee was I can't remember his name right now. I didn't know him, but I felt like I could have known him. Like I felt like we must have been in the same room several times. Anyway, it just affected me. So all of that happened right on Market Street in San Francisco. And now not even the Whole Foods can stay open, right? So it's just open air poo everywhere. It's a latrine, open air drug use. I saw yesterday that San Francisco now has more intravenous drug users than high school students. High school students, right? So the population there is enormous. And they ended up having a problem the other day with Elon Musk because his office on that street, he took the W out of Twitter so that it read titter. And they complained about it and said, you can't remove the letter. So he put the letter back, the W, but painted it white so it blended in with the background. So it still said titter in blue, right? This is the kind of irreverence that is so useful. Imagine that in a city like San Francisco with people getting murdered in the street, you can't even open a Whole Foods. It's an open air shithole, and there's more drug addicts, needle drug addicts, not just drug addicts, needle drug addicts, and there are high school students, and they're worried about a letter on a sign, and it's a perfect way to troll what's going on, right? So penetrating deep and hard with the BBC, hairy balls. Now, all the other stuff that Elon's had going on in the past couple of days kind of got erased because of this irreverence, right? Just the story of what he's been doing is so funny that it's hard to pay attention to anything else that he's doing, right? There's other things in the world you can pay attention to, of course. But other things in the world become a little less interesting just because this is so funny. Again, he turned the interview around on the guy, and here's some just some funny anecdotes that come out of it, right? The BBC slug, according to Jack Possibly, right? So you took away the COVID misinformation labels. Elon says, you mean about the BBC's misinformation about COVID? For example, not reporting the side effects of vaccinations because the British government pressured you? And then he ends up asking the BBC interviewer, do you like the BBC? And he can't answer it. He can't end up he end up can't he's not able to answer it. And then again, of course, he turns it around. But here's what I wanted to mention. I'll give a few more of these examples, right? Um, Before I tell you what I thought was the most important takeaway and what we're going to see. There's still some juice to squeeze out of this that's very important, right? The BBC reporter tries to pivot to questions that attempt to embarrass Elon, but the interview isn't doing a good job. This is Ian Miles Chong, still Gray, giving a blow by blow of the whole thing. Elon is just being honest about the mistakes he's made along the way. And he says, all's well that ends well, right? So he's trying to embarrass him about losing money. It's fine. And in the end, he tries to push him on even the losing money. Remember, we've been laughing about this idea of like, oh, Elon is such an idiot. He lost a few $1 billion. Oh my God, if you want to learn how to lose a few $1 billion, just go ask Elon. Look what he did with Twitter, man. Just the dumbest stuff. Meanwhile, he's shooting rockets up to space every single day. He's got a bunch of other businesses that are going just fine, right? He's doing the Texas Freedom City, which I think if he gets it right for his own staff, you can actually commoditize that model. We talk all the time here about new city engineering, Bitcoin citadels being one of the major foundations of the economy going forward. Terraformation, recreation of our cities. I mostly believe we're not even going to try and fix our cities in the end. We're going to build brand new ones, right? Just brand new. And Elon Musk is the kind of guy, once he practices it with his own staff in Texas, might be able to replicate it at scale for anywhere else that needs a new city. So here he says that he must confess that he has some delight in removing the verified badge from the New York Times and from calling NPR state-sponsored media or government-funded media, and the BBC being called state government-funded media. Here he says again, here's Ian Miles Chong. Elon says the media is a great purveyor of misinformation, that the average citizen has more knowledge than the journalist on any given topic. And when the average citizen has more knowledge than Hold on. It said my connection was screwed up for a second. I think we're good. Don't know what that was. We'll be okay. Let me know in the comments something happened. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. It was 2 seconds. I get a warning. The screen turns. I saw it right away, guys. You didn't miss anything. That was the first little snafu we've had on connection in a long time, isn't it? Things have been a little weird here today, though, so I don't know. We'll see. So let's go back to what he says, right? He says that when the average citizen has more knowledge than a journalist on a given topic, it gives one the impression that journalists have no idea what they're talking about. Such journalists have no expertise. Of course, he's talking about the Murray-Gell-Mann amnesia. That's Gell-Mann amnesia that he's talking about there. If you don't remember or don't know what Gell-Mann amnesia is, it's one of the most important things you'll ever have to understand what's going on in the world around us right now. Gell-Mann amnesia was named by Michael Crichton, who we talk about all the time here in the morning. Right? Michael Crichton invented the whole concept of Gell-Mann amnesia. And what he did was he used his friend Murray Gell-Mann, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist. And Gell-Mann ended up telling Michael Crichton, and Michael Crichton even admits, I just use the name because it's fancy and sounds smart, right? Gell-Mann amnesia. It's nothing to do with Murray Gell-Mann, except that Gell-Mann was criticizing something about physics, saying, oh, how stupid. Look what this dumb journalist wrote about the thing that I'm a Nobel Prize winner in. And he turned the newspaper page and then read the next article as if it was real, right? And it was on politics or whatever. And that's where Michael Crichton said, whoa. Understand, Mr. Gell-Mann, Nobel Prize winning physicist, that someone else in the world who's an expert on the thing that you're now reading about is having the exact same reaction you had to the article about physics, right? So Gell-Mann amnesia is about understanding that the media has no credibility, which you know when you're reading about a story that you know about, like Bitcoin mining, like all those other things. But it's that when you turn the page, the amnesia comes in where you give them credibility just because you're not that knowledgeable in the next subject. So what Crichton told Gell-Mann was, hey, they're as dumb here as they were there, right? And that is the effect of Gell-Mann amnesia, which is what Elon is underlining here with the BBC journalist. Notice he didn't say Gelman amnesia to the media journalist or the BBC journalist, because he's probably too stupid. Just guessing. Here's where it gets funny as well. So this is the money, right? Elon Musk said he would not consider taking $44 billion or even considering it if ordered to sell. The BBC journalist got cornered by Elon when asked who he thought could run Twitter better, and asked him to provide examples, right? So in the end, this BBC guy was just totally unprepared for who he was getting in the ring with. Didn't understand that Elon was pulling the Superman 2 move, Superman 2, when he turned the tables on Lord Zod, right? When the lights were on in here, but not out there, right? And then everyone lost. He was protected in the chamber, right? If you didn't see that movie. So there you go. He goes after him, right? He says, have you ever seen the hateful content? This is the one where he's saying, oh, the For You page has been full of things, right? And Elon says, give me one example. And he says, well, I can't think of one off the top of my head. And Elon goes right in for the jugular here. So you lied, right? So you lied. So in the end, the journalist had to run out of the room. He couldn't stick around. He got penetrated too deep and hard, and it didn't work out for him at all. Now, the question here around what we saw yesterday with, let me go back to the important part. This is the important part, right? This is the one last point on the Elon Musk BBC interview that I think is vital to understand. And this comes from Farzad Mesbahi. Pardon me if I mispronounced his name. Absolutely not intentional. And his Twitter handle is Farziness. I put that in the link I put his Twitter handle in the description. So what he says here is it will be absolutely fascinating watching the BBC edit versus what was covered in the spaces. Will be a real-time insight into how mainstream media edits to fit a certain narrative. If the BBC actually tries to run a narrative after this space, it will lose any credibility it has left, right? And he goes on to say that the media is different from today going forward, that it will never be the same. Now, I think we've been waiting for this for a long time, but now that we know, and it's something that Trump showed us, but Trump, he's got his own limitations, right? But now that we see with what Pierre Rochard did, the irreverence, with what Elon Musk is doing, the irreverence is the way forward when it comes to dealing with these people. We can't engage them in a logical battle of wits. We can't do that when it comes to environmentalism and Bitcoin. The cry harder meme is probably the only thing we have that is so effective. Cry harder. One of the best arguments we can use, the don't care, didn't read, right? That Bitcoin actually hit $30,000 yesterday while this hit piece was happening, I think is sort of proof that the world is changing as far as media effectiveness. A New York Times hit piece like that on Bitcoin 10 years ago is a different story for the price. I don't think it's nearly as anti-fragile as it has become. And now that we have this mimetic ability to deal with the New York Times, now Bitcoiners, of course, are much more aware than the average person, right? Much more aware than the average person. So we've understood the irreverence for a while. We've understood how to counter these mainstream folks. Pierre Rochard is on the same level of awareness as Elon Musk when it comes to what happened in the past few days. It was the same move, right? It was the same move. But we're now spreading that much wider. When you see the irreverence, the lack of respect that Elon Musk had for this guy, and the absolute lack of politeness. He just pounded him in the face and embarrassed him to the point where the guy had to run out of the interview, right? So excellent stuff. We love to see it. Couldn't be funnier. And now it actually makes you realize, right, what we talked about yesterday with this new Twitter influencer strategy in the White House, right? So that's what we were talking about yesterday. And there's a few more details on it today, and I'll bring those up right now because they're important. And they look like this, right? So one more point on Twitter, just so you know, it looks like they're going to try and ban it and testing it out right now in Elon just plainly said he was lying. Yeah. So the Brazilian government, Lula government, looks like they're going to try and shut Twitter down. So they're asking the Supreme Court for it. The Lula government is considering asking the Supreme Court to ban Twitter. We'll see where that goes, but it looks like they're going to give it a shot, right? Uh, so that's a development, but what are you going to do? So let me get the piece I wanted to bring up on the influencers. Where did I put it? Where did I put it? So the whole thing's out of order because I didn't get to put it in my right order. So that's why I'm a little. These were the technical stupid snafus that I had before the show today. Very annoying. Did not get my. Let me see if the album actually came in. No, still no. What a piece of shit. All right. What a piece of shit. Where the heck are they? Well, I'll just go to the Canadian story because I guess it's relevant. It's related. So now, remember the what we just talked about here. This idea that we're understanding the Murray Gell-Mann effect a little better. We're understanding how to counter mainstream media a little better. Irreverence is key, but this edit piece is really important, right? This selective edit piece. And now, if you go look at Canada, right? I'm going to talk about Canada for a few minutes here. If you go look at what's happening in Canada, you start to see how crazy this selective editing can be. So yesterday there was big news in Canada, right? I mean, real, actual big news. So there's been rumors or proof now that the election that they recently had in Canada in 2021, maybe 2020, they had an election right after COVID. Yeah, maybe. They had an election recently. And it turned out that one of the candidates received a shit ton of money from the CCP and from the Chinese Communist government. And it looks like there's been foreign influence in the elections. It's a main subject. Even the mainstream news talks about it in Canada. Even the Globe and Mail, which is a New York Times, Washington Post-like newspaper in Canada. So lots of folks talking about it. But it's actually now bubbled up to actual legal ramifications. So what ended up happening was Trudeau appointed a guy, a lawyer, who used to be the chairman of my university and the governor general of Canada, my alma mater. He was the chairman there. His name was David Johnston, and supposed to be a real guy, supposed to be credible, but he was on the Trudeau Foundation, which is the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, Justin Trudeau's dad. So this guy from Canada was supposed to be looking at this influence. That was the way to get rid of the problem, right? Get a guy who's a lawyer, a credible person to come in. And the federal election was held on September. Thank you. Yeah. It was. I knew it was post COVID, so it was sort of recently, because he's got a minority government, right? So he's being propped up by a third parties because we could have elections at any time in Canada. It's a small fact, but important. They can't run out the clock here necessarily. So what ended up happening was the guy they appointed was a family friend of Trudeau, and the guy from my university and from the former governor general was a friend of Trudeau and was on the board of the Pierre Trudeau Foundation. So now a little bit of time has gone by. They've seen more of the money and Chinese influence move around. And now yesterday, the whole board of the Trudeau Foundation quit. The president, the CEO, everybody, because they've seen that, and they got caught with some CCP donations, which they gave back, but it didn't stem the complaints. So here's what's amazing. All right, we're back. What a bunch of bullshit, huh? What a bunch of bullshit. No idea why that happened. I mean, honestly, I just checked the internet. This is hard lined in, guys. This is hard lined in. There's no way this is internet today. There's no way. I've got multiple connections. Yeah, maybe I should do some Vita time. I mean, look, I still think YouTube honestly is one of the best entertainment platforms in the world. I get a lot of information from YouTube, as despite the craziness, but this is too much. All right, where the fuck was I? Where was I? All right, we were talking about Canada, what's going on. So, what's going on? China pulling the strings in Canada, the media being complicit in it, not doing anything about it, right? And so, remember, we mentioned that the BBC was government funded media. We mentioned NPR being government funded media. Now, imagine with Trudeau, we know there's election interference, right? That's clear. People who are personally now exposed with the Pierre Trudeau Foundation have quit because they don't want to be around this, right? They don't want to be around what they think is no good. The prime minister has come out and said, well, there's no direct or indirect connection to him and his dad's foundation and the Chinese money, but there's a bunch. Like his brother's on the foundation. Is that direct or is that indirect? Yeah. So here's what's amazing. Yeah. Here, boo boo. What is amazing? Here's what's amazing. So the CBC, right, despite all of this stuff, has gone with the following headlines on their webpage, right? And Viva Frei brings it up. He says, do you know what story is not on the front page of CBC News? Apparently, Brittany Griner's memoir, so it's there, he brings the receipts, is more newsworthy than the CEO and board directors of the Trudeau Foundation resigning. And he says, Viva Frei, well paid, Justin Trudeau. Because, of course, we don't have independent media in Canada. All media is subsidized by the government now because they can't compete with American private interests. So they're even stupider than normal private media because they'll just get gobbled up, right? So here are the stories. It's about a couple of girls who had an abusive partner, and now they're friends and they're against their ex. Right? That's one of the stories. The Brittany Griner story. They got some stuff about homeowners and mortgages, and then they're pumping her. Brittany Griner was the U.S. It's not even a Canadian story. She's American, right? And she was held in Russia for marijuana, I think, or something like that. And then that was it, right? So Trudeau not capable of defending himself on this and looking dumber by the day, right? Looking dumber by the day. But the problem that I have, and it's not just America, it's not just Canada with this issue. Let's look at the other one, which is just as important, I think, and that is this new White House strategy with the influencers, which we talked about yesterday, right? So the White House influencers that we talked about yesterday on the show, they're going to hire this White House influencer group. And where are they all going to be? Where are they all from? TikTok. We're starting to see the names. Harry Sisson, 20-year-old from NYU, who breaks down daily news on TikTok. All these guys are going to get access to the White House. And they've got 500,000 followers and da da da. But your working assumption at this point, right? Because now we can all admit the Restrict Act was fake legislation. It was never happening, right? It was never happening. The Restrict Act was the thing we heard about a few weeks ago regarding the United States, regarding TikTok, right? So it was the one regarding TikTok. And in the end, it touched on every single social media site. It touched on everyone. So it was not credible legislation. It was what I predicted in January, I think, here, that you would see an A game like you've never seen before in lobbying, misinformation, reframing the debate, that TikTok was going to come with its absolute best strategy. And the best strategy was a fake legislation that got everyone sidetracked, everyone way overboard against TikTok. So even got people defending TikTok, right? You got people defending TikTok because of the board. People like myself, even, who had said, I don't want this legislation. Now, I never believed the legislation was credible. We said it here from the very beginning. Don't pay attention to Restrict Act. It's never going to get passed. It's not real legislation. It's terrible that someone would even think this way. Just a complete disaster. I got a little confused for a while. I thought the Josh Hawley thing was a part of it, but it's not. I was confused that it didn't fit my narrative, which we all suffer from, narrative bias. It didn't fit what I understood was going on. And luckily, some of you great guys helped me understand more. Some people DM me saying you had it a little confused. The Josh Hawley thing was a separate piece of legislation. It wasn't the one regarding, it wasn't the Restrict Act. So now I saw that right away. And the Restrict Act was never credible. But your working assumption now has to be, right? If you see what Biden is doing, if you see the pass Hunter Biden is getting, right? If you see what Joe Biden is doing with these influencers, if you're serious about shutting down TikTok, do you hire all these TikTok influencers for your election? Probably not, right? Probably not. So you in Canada and in the United States, you have to have an assumption now, that China is either got something on these people and is able to blackmail them to do what they want, or even worse. Right? I think it's a simple blackmail. I think we're dealing with ego. I think we're dealing with people who don't want to be shamed, embarrassed. Now, some of this might be criminal, right? Some of it might be criminal, but the idea now that these influences from China are not real in America or Canada has to be forgotten. These things are happening all around us, look real, and look super dangerous for democracy, right? But they look super dangerous for us, right? No one wants to live in a CCP-controlled North America, especially if it's all on blackmail and all that. So again, you see a lot of the projection around influence that, it's something that Tucker Carlson said for a long time. And the first time he said it, I was like, oh, that basically everything Democrats accuse Republicans of, they are themselves guilty of. Racism, right? All of these things. And one of the important ones was always Russia collusion. That was sort of proof, right? We know Hillary Clinton colluded with the Russians to get Trump out. And in the end, the projection here, the psychological projection, is that no, Trump colluded with Russia, which is never true. There was no blackmail material on Trump. Trump is probably the most scrutinized political candidate in 100 years. And they never found anything like that on him. So Trump, Tucker said that originally, like, you've always got to look for projection. You've always got to look for what they accuse others of is what they're actually doing. And that sort of has played out more and more realistically over time. And yesterday, I don't know if you saw, but Trump actually sat down with Tucker Carlson about all of these things. And he gave a couple of really great answers. So Trump knew, I didn't believe Trump about this. Trump was saying before the 2020 election, before the primaries and nominations back in 2018, he was saying for sure Joe Biden is going to be the person who runs against him. I thought it was going to be, I didn't know how bad Kamala Harris, actually, how untalented she was, or whatever her problems are. I thought she was going to win. I was sure of it. And now, so Tucker asked Trump yesterday if he thinks Joe's going to run again. And he gave an honest answer. He said, I don't think something's wrong. I don't think he can, right? I don't think he can. Now, as you know, we would love another Biden. We love Fetterman 2024, right? We love Fetterman. We're all about bringing the IQ down. But here's the projection part, right? This is an interesting part of what happened. And Tucker put it plainly, because the whole interview was around foreign relations and what's going on abroad. And here's what Tucker said. He goes, for the past 7 years, the neocon media establishment has been telling you that Donald Trump is a dangerous lunatic. In 2 years in office, Joe Biden has brought the world to the brink of nuclear holocaust. Who is the dangerous lunatic, right? And that's the projection right there, right? That's the projection. That's you're a dangerous lunatic. Meanwhile, we've got Hunter Biden selling art for $85,000 a pop. We've got TikTok bans that are fake, and we've got TikTok influencers getting hired to talk about God knows what, and to get motivated and engaged in the election, because they know, it looks like they know, that the New York Times, it can't even get a flick of a shot on Bitcoiners anymore. The BBC is probably powerless after this. I think that's a total castration. I think they're done. I think after this, the amount of jokes, once Elon Musk shows the way, just like Pierre Rochard showed the way on Irreverence, if this scales and you get a bunch of people doing the same things that only were on 4chan just 5 years ago, chasing Shia LaBeouf's flag around and all that stuff, that goes mainstream, we're in a totally different landscape. And again, I said the biggest political story of 2017 was 4chan. I tried to nominate them for most influential that year in CoinDesk, just because I thought, they had done so many interesting things. A lot of Bitcoiners creating the memes there and having a good time, and the weaponized autism that is there is excellent. Even Elon Musk says he's an autist, right? So we get these weaponized autists now that are engaged in all of this stuff and getting results, right? So in the end, the lesson is irreverence, and don't take these guys seriously. Don't fight them with facts. Fight them with things that are funny. All right, let's see some of these comments. I got a lot here. This is all about China pulling strings, time to break up with YouTube. It's all part of the charm. It shouldn't have been that bad. You need to put out a "I'm not suicidal. You're a global treasure." Thanks, AR. I appreciate that. That's very sweet of you. We're not going anywhere. They're not getting us. Don't you worry. Vita, yeah, I'll have a look at the Vita, guys. Canada, China. I see you put the Gina. China thinks their control is in the shadows. Nolan for PM. I ran for the House once in Canada under Harper. I got killed. You're on it. Yeah, you were saying that China. Yeah. CPI just came in. Cool. And have a look at that later. And said, yeah, that was for his interviews. There's one going kind of viral about that. In the Chess World Championship game press conference, China had a propagandist ask a question about China feeling like Kazakhstan just a few minutes ago. They want control. Yeah. Nobody trusts them or like their behavior. Yeah. White House influencers might as well just go all the way and build Department of Propaganda or a 50 Cent army. Yeah. I don't want to take away the discussion. It's just money pays better than Dubai for porta potties. For porta potties. Yeah. Threat to democracy. The racism fighters are not racists. Yeah, I just thought she was. Yeah. Sorry, dang. I had this. I see the notes were sucky today because it didn't sync. So I was a little. I didn't have it. What I do is I normally put things in order in an album. I take screenshots, I put them in order in an album, and then I use the album to just go through an order. Today it wouldn't do that, so I had to go back through the notes and piece together what I remembered. So I missed a few. Indeed, I did mention the Jordan Peterson thing, so I'll talk about that really quickly. This is incredible. So imagine you get the Trudeau thing, and everyone's in the drama of Trudeau and what's going on with Trudeau and all that stuff. Meanwhile, it looks like they sent a letter saying they're going to cancel the natural resource royalty agreements they have with the provinces. And if they did that, again, I don't think Canada makes it in general, right? You've heard me predict a million times here, Canada ain't going to make it. It's not a real country. It's the dumbest group of provinces that ever joined together, and there's no point to it. It's just stupid, right? And I wish it wasn't. It could have been a good idea. It could have worked, but we don't treat each other neighborly at all, and we don't help each other. There's no point to being a union. And in the end, there's nothing really keeping it together. As an English Quebecer, I don't have anything in common other than, I don't know, hockey with someone from Alberta. I love the Albertans, love the people, love everyone, love Ontarians, love Westerners, love people from British Columbia. Great. But they mean as much to me as people from California. I love people from California. I love people from Iowa, right? I love all the people, right, in my continent. But this fake country thing, no. Why, right? What is going on here? I think it separates. I think the whole country separates. I think America eventually, the way I see it all working out is America is going to create a new form of federalism once the Washington, D.C. and the federal government basically sinks, right? Once the federal government doesn't become a major power in the way America works, I do think you're going to get a renegotiation between states and the federal government. You're going to have a new deal, let's say, more powers being devolved to the states, more self-awareness of the individual states as countries, as states, as nations, or whatever we want to call it. And they're going to exercise their powers way more. They're going to reduce the size of DC, reduce the government, reduce the sway, reduce the whole centralizing force around that. And once that new deal is out there, I believe there's going to be opt-in abilities for places like Mexico that allow them to retain their sovereignty and tap into this free trade-ish, light touch confederation. And the Canadian provinces are going to bolt. They're gone. Like they were so mistreated by Ottawa. Ottawa's too stupid to do what's going to happen in the States. It's going to happen in the States first, right? They're going to melt it all, and it's going to be crazy, and we're going to have a new deal. And then I think, anyway, the Canadian states will simply join the new deal. Quebec will be on its own, right? Quebec doesn't need anybody. They're like Texas. They absolutely don't require anything like a federal entity above them. They're going to be fine. Ontario will be fine too. I think they're in the same boat. They don't need anyone else. They're like a country. They have everything they need. They're going to be all more successful as a result, right? I don't think this means bad things for Canada. It just means more folks living in governments that are closer to them. America will get its land bridge to Alaska, right? It's going to go up way to Alaska. And now you've got Jordan Peterson egging it on, right? Don't negotiate, separate if you have to. So maybe the forces of separation do begin in Canada first before the United States changes their ways, but it'll be easier for China to take over Canada and USA lose their nationalism. Yeah, I look, country and government aren't the same thing, right? Americans have a love of their country. Some Canadians do. It's a thing, but not where I live, right? Not in my part of, and Quebec is as big as Texas and California combined, relative to Quebec's role in Canada would be like mixing California and Texas, like the proportionate size of it. It's like between 20 and 25% of the population of Canada. It's a big province, and they don't have any sense of Canadian nationalism at all. They don't want to be closed-minded, crazy statists, ego-filled separatists. But if there was a deal out there that was better for them, they'd take it, right? I thought Canada was mad at their government leadership. They are, but the problem is that the disillusion in Canada is deeper than that. It never really took off as a country. It's not this, like, you can't port over American sense of nationalism to Canadians and then think it's equal. It's not, right? It's just, it never really came together that way. And as a Quebecer, as an English Quebecer, I'll tell you, I had less culture shock moving to Brooklyn than I did living in Waterloo, Ontario. Like I did, like I got more in common with New Englanders where I live now as a Eastern Townships English guy than I ever did with it. Ontario is like the Midwest. It's the Midwest, right? New Englanders are different. I grew up in a New England part of Quebec. It's not the same. It's just not, even linguistically, it's not the same. We say soda. They're on the pop, give me a can of pop. What are you talking about? Pop, all right? All Midwest stuff, right? All Midwest stuff. So it's just different. Like if the Quebec separatists weren't so crazy, I would be a Quebec separatist. I am a Quebec separatist, just not in the way that separatism has been discussed in Canada, right? Not the way it's been discussed in Canada. The way it's been discussed in Canada is an ego trip for French Canadians. That's not, and you can tell it's an ego trip for French Canadians because no other group has joined them. Like the Irish, who always had as much in common with Quebecers trying to get away from an English crown as anybody, and they never joined. They weren't welcome. Right? The Irish are not welcome in the very ethnocentric separation movement in Quebec. They would love for people like me to join, But even if you remember, when they had their last referendum, they blamed it on the ethnic vote, right? And to them, I'm ethnic. I'm an ethnic. I'm not a Quebecois, right? And I'm okay with that, right? I'm a Quebecer, not a Quebecois. But I love Quebecois. I'm a total fan, just like I'm a fan of Canadians. I really am. I love the people. They're great. The country is very stupid. It's a dumb idea. It doesn't work, and it's got to go. Right? It's not getting anywhere. It's not bringing anyone anything anymore. Alberta would have been gone a long time ago had they not been landlocked, and I think they're going to go anyway. So get rid of it. It's stupid. Don't need it. The world wouldn't even notice if Canada was gone. It's not necessary. It's just a complete loser federation. I wish it wasn't the case. I used to think very differently. I used to think it was a plan B for the world if America failed, but it's nothing like that. It's a scam. Shitcoin country. Yeah. Nice to admit who we are and admit that we can love others who we are not. Yeah, I mean, I'm we will give. Mais je parle français. Arrête. Where do I say? Je viens de Québec quand même. Voyons donc, man. Je suis québécois. Je suis québécois. Moi et tout. But I'll vote we. Yeah. Oh, gone again. All right, team. It looks like it's trying to act up again on this connection. I've gone a little long. I think you guys are great. Sorry about all the connection troubles today. Something's up because I'm telling you, I'm triple connected. There's no way. There's no way. Mais ciao les mecs!